Jeremy Corbyn, very striking moment in Conference Hall this morning when Keir Starmer said the option of Remain was open. Massive standing ovation. Can I check, did he clear that statement with you?
The speech was of course discussed in advance, and what we said was that we'd put this motion to conference, which was agreed by 200 delegates from differing perspectives who wanted to A, make the point that the 6 tests that we've laid down must be put to the government and the government held to account on them, and we would then consider all options.
But just to be clear, the explicit line, which actually wasn't in the version that he put out, that Remain is an option, you knew he was going to say that?
The speech was cleared, so yes, of course I knew.
Very good. And so it is, again, sorry to be slightly repetitive, but it is official policy that Remain is an option.
A speech isn't policy, a speech is a speech. The policy is the motion that's carried.
Yeah.
And the motion
and
has been put...
does the motion imply that Remain is on the table?
The motion says we would hold the government to account against the 6 tests because of the incompetence of their negotiations 27 months in, and they're still no further forward, and that we would vote accordingly in Parliament. And that would be then a signal for, hopefully, the government to go back and negotiate something better if they're defeated in Parliament, or get out of the way and have an election so that the country can make a decision on who it wants to handle this situation.
And if there isn't an election, Remain as an option in a referendum is on the table?
Well, there's quite a few stages that have to be passed before you even get to that kind of discussion. The principle has to be the 6 tests we put down, which are about protecting jobs and living standards, trading relationship, and looking very seriously at the situation facing manufacturing industry at the moment. Jaguar Land Rover gone on to a 3-day week, other companies very, very worried, and supply chains at risk, and medicine supplies and many others at risk unless there is a serious arrangement with the European Union to have tariff-free trade and a form of customs union with the European Union to prevent a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic.
And just to be clear, if she brings anything to Parliament that looks like her Chequers plan, that fails your tests and Labour would vote against?
Yes. Obviously it will be tested against our questions, our 6 questions.
And just to be clear, and I thought you'd already said this, your view is Chequers fails those tests, doesn't it?
Yes, it is my view, but they may come up with something else, but I doubt it. But we are ready to put that question to Parliament.
Now, a chunk of your voters, not the majority, but a good chunk of your voters voted to leave. Mm-hmm. Don't you worry that some of them will think that you are standing in the way of Brexit?
I have travelled a great deal around the country. I spend a lot of time talking to people and listening to them, and people voted different ways in the referendum, of course. Nobody voted to lose their job, nobody voted to damage the living standards of the majority of people in this country. They voted leave out of anger at deindustrialisation, anger at fly-by-night economics, which replaces skilled unionised jobs with 0 hours contracts. And so I think the economic offer the Labour Party is making is something that's actually very attractive to those communities, and that will continue to put.
Do you think anybody voted for a no-deal Brexit in that referendum?
Well, it's very hard to know the motives of everybody in voting, but I would have assumed everybody voting would have thought, well, if you stay, you stay. If you leave on some kind of negotiated terms. You don't just walk away. And nobody ever said to me at any point during that referendum debate that they were going to walk away from everything. Quite the opposite, actually.
And because...
But I think we should also bear in mind that one of the big problems is that this Conservative government is actually facing 2 ways at the same time, because on the one hand it's supposed to be negotiating with the European Union, then you've got Liam Fox and Boris Johnson when he was Foreign Secretary and now on the back benches looking for some kind of wholly different deal with the USA, which would give investor protection, which would also result in the reduction in regulations in our food industry as well as rights at work. And so I think that anyone negotiating with this government think, well, actually, what do you want? And indeed, people across Europe often say to me, do you know what the government actually wants?
Do you think Theresa May's boiled down negotiating position, no deal is better than a bad deal, is credible?
No, I don't, because that would mean if there's no deal, presumably you'd go on to World Trade Organization rules rather quickly, which would mean tariffs on a lot of manufactured goods. And then you've got some quite complicated positions. I mean, if you take Ford Motor Company, engine manufacturer in Bridgend, those engines that they make in Bridgend and go to Germany installed in cars, the parts cross the channel many times. Likewise with others in the food supply industry or the food processing industry. So there has to be an agreement. You cannot do it without an agreement.
And just to be clear, and this is actually something that Keir Starmer did more or less say in an interview this morning, if we were staring at a no-deal Brexit and the only way to prevent that would be to delay the date of leaving the EU, would you be in favour of that?
It's a bit of a hypothetical question. Our determination would be to get an agreement with the EU, and we would move might and main to achieve that if we were in
But there's
government.
not a lot of time left.
No,
I mean, March the 29th is no time at all in negotiating terms. So surely you've got to keep open the option of delaying the moment of departure.
27 months gone and very little achieved. There are not very many more months to go. I see that. There is an urgency in what we're pushing the government on. There doesn't appear to be so much urgency on the government side.
But even on your preferred option of a general election, it's inconceivable that if you won that election, there would be enough time to negotiate a deal by the 29th of March. So surely you're in favour of delaying the date.
We would negotiate, and we're the ones that put forward the idea of a transition period anyway, and that would...
But the transition period falls away if there isn't an agreement.
Indeed, but we'd try to make sure there was an agreement.
So I think what you're saying is it is an option delaying the 29th of March, because none of the rest of what you've said makes sense unless you're prepared to accept that's a possibility.
Look, all the options are going to be there. That's absolutely clear. But we have to put the points to the government, as I keep saying, on our 6 points, because they represent actually what a vast mass of people who voted both Leave and Remain are worried about: jobs, living standards, trade.
Now, over the summer, when things weren't exactly going brilliantly for the government, particularly in respect to Brexit negotiations, there was a lot of focus on Labour because of the perception that you were not taking tough enough action against anti-Semites. Do you regret how long it took for you to come up with a proposal that seems, for now, to have satisfied your critics on this?
I was elected leader. The issue of a very small number of people behaving in an anti-Semitic way was brought to my attention. I asked Shami Chakrabarti to undertake an inquiry and to produce a report and a process on it, which she did, and thank you to her and well done her. We have dealt with cases, and I have ensured that there is no delay on dealing with them, and we're increasing the size of what's called our National Constitutional Committee to ensure these things are done more quickly. I've spent my life as an anti-racist campaigner. Our party has adopted a very clear position on anti-Semitism, and also ensured there is an opportunity to have free speech on all these issues.
You've now adopted the IHRA definition.
We adopted the definition from the very beginning.
But not with all the examples. And people close to you, people you trust, like John Lansman, were saying weeks before that you did adopt the IHRA and all its examples that that's what you should do. Why did you delay?
The NEC, without a vote, agreed on the definition and agreed on a process and agreed to consult on the last few examples. They consulted and then came to a conclusion that they would adopt them all and would include also a very clear statement that none of this would close down any credible, open, respectful discussion on the issues of relations between Israel and Palestine and the rights of Palestinian people.
But don't you have any regrets about how long this has dogged you for?
I'm very clear that I'm opposed to racism in any form, and I will be opposed to racism in any form all my life. We have reached a position that I think is very clear, and we're moving on from there.
I mean, everyone hates to personalise these things, but as you know, I am Jewish, and therefore I have been concerned about how long it took you as a party to say the sorts of things in the Jewish community that didn't satisfy everybody, but it satisfied more people. Do you understand why I would feel uncomfortable in these circumstances?
Robert, I understand anyone feeling concerned when they hear anti-Semitic language, when they hear anti-Semitic tropes, when they get that abominable abuse. I fully understand that, and that is why I wanted us to be very clear as a party, and why I asked Shami to bring up that proposal, and why the NEC wanted to discuss it and debate it and come back and agree it. I think we're in a very clear position now.
I mean, there is a sort of general issue beyond anti-Semitism itself, which a number of your colleagues have raised with me, which is you are a party, you're a leader who wants to form a government. As and when you become Prime Minister, you will face hugely challenging decisions every single day.
Of course.
And some of your colleagues have said it just took you too long for somebody who wants to be Prime Minister to sort this out.
We have made our position very clear and will continue to do so. I think decisions are best made after a process of consultation and listening to all shades of opinion in all communities. And I've had many opinions offered to me from people in the Jewish community and in other communities, but I think we've reached a very clear position now.
Now, your policies are in the round. I would argue the most left-wing of any British party on the cusp of taking power in living memory. Do you ever sort of pinch yourself that, you know, Downing Street is close?
It's people around this country who are working on zero-hours contracts, young people who can't get anywhere to live, people wondering how on earth an older relative is going to be looked after in a barely existent care service in some parts of the country. They're the ones that the Labour Party works for and represents. And an economy that grows by investment through a national investment bank, through regional investment banks, regional transformation, and above all, giving all young people a real hope. And that's why our very radical proposals on education have been put forward. I think they're very exciting, and the great legacy of the next Labour government is going to be a national education service.
National Education Service, as you say, ambitious. We've also got very ambitious plans unveiled by John McDonnell for workers controlling big chunks of companies. You unveiled a plan for workers to have a third of the seats on boards. Much of what you're proposing is a challenge to what's typically called the establishment. Now, your old friend Andrew Murray thinks that because you're challenging the establishment so much, he thinks the Secret Services are probably working to undermine you. Is that a legitimate fear on it? Do you share that fear that he has?
I haven't noticed it if they are. So it's not something that keeps me awake at night. In fact, nothing keeps me awake at night.
So they're trying to upset Andrew, but not you?
Well, put it this way. What we're proposing on election of directors, what we're proposing on a fund to invest in worker directors and their support, what we're proposing on cooperatives would not be seen as terribly radical in most of Germany or most of Scandinavia. What we're proposing is actually to use the creative ability and skills of all workers in all companies to ensure that company is better and stronger and its products are improved. We as a country lose an awful lot by our system of ignoring those on the shop floor, those that actually do the work.
Now, finally, because I'm getting the conspicuous signal that we're almost out of time. Saw you at the gym this morning. You're famously somebody who lives very healthily. And I definitely don't say this in any kind of derogatory way. But
what else is coming here?
But it is a fact that if you became Prime Minister next year, you would, I think, be the oldest individual to become Prime Minister for the first time. Does that mean that you have a view that you would only want to do a certain number of years as PM?
I'm very happy. I'm very fit. I'm very proud to lead our party, and I'll carry on doing exactly that because I want to bring out about social transformation. I want to give real hope to young people and those that are up against it in our society.
And at what point would you know that you'd done the job you'd set up to do?
When we'd achieved it.
Okay. Very nice to see you. Jeremy Corbyn, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.